everyone. We have a very timely, special week for you on the Brain Warriors Way podcast. We have Dr. Parris Kidd with us, and we're going to talk about immunity, your body, and your brain. And Dr. Kidd is the Chief Science Officer at BrainMD. He is really considered one of the world's experts in using nutritional medicine, nutraceuticals, dietary supplements to optimize both the brain and the body. He's trained in cell biology from UC Berkeley, where he has his PhD. He's done research. He was involved in bringing phosphatidylserine to the United States. He's written books and papers, and he's a wonderful friend and lecturer. So, Parris, welcome to the Brain Warriors Way podcast.
We are so lucky to have you. You've been so helpful to our community as well.
It's great to be on. Great to join you.
Yeah.
So we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and this is so frightening for many people. And as I've been lecturing about it, I say your best defense against COVID is your immune system. So it's not the government, it's not, the vaccine that's coming, although I'm not opposed to that or to the treatments. But if you want to protect yourself, you have to strengthen your immune system. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Right, yeah. Well, the immune system is our security force.
Yep.
It's a sophisticated, highly sophisticated, complex system of individual cells supported by solid tissues and the various organs. These cells are posted as sentries in all of the tissues, including the brain, and they're continually sampling the environment around them for foreign substances. Whether those substances would be bacteria or something non-living like an air pollutant particle or asbestos in the lungs or a virus. And so they're continually feeling along the surface of the particle, and depending on the shape and the types of molecules on the surface, they decide whether this particular particle belongs to the body, whether it's a self-type particle, or whether it's foreign to the body. And then if they decide it's foreign, they do their very best to eliminate it.
So, some of us seem to be better at fighting those than others, right? It's obvious. And some of us who have had issues in the past. So I had autoimmune issues. I've also had cancer. I grew up just not a very healthy kid. Mono when I was a kid, just all sorts of health issues. And on constant antibiotics. And I've been fortunate to be surrounded by people like you and I've taken, classes with some of the, world's expert in immunity. So I've learned how to sort of build my immunity. But why? Maybe you can break it down in really simple terms for some of our people watching. Why do some of us have such a hard time with our defense system fighting off these foreign invaders compared to other people? Daniel, when he gets sick, it's highly annoying to everyone in the family. He'll come in, he's like, I'm sick, I don't feel well. He'll go lay down, 2 hours later, he wakes up and he's fine. And I'm not joking. It's weird. But for me, if I get sick, I'm down. I'm down for the count for weeks. And so that's why I'm so much more careful. And the number of supplements I take is insane. But why? Explain that to us.
Well, that would be the $64 billion question. We don't really know why one person differs from others, except to say that there are so many different factors that can come into it. Now, the instinctive guess is almost always to begin with genetics, right? Well, that may or may not be a factor, what we inherited exactly. But what's becoming clear from the modern research is that the nutrients that we take into our bodies have a great deal to do with how our genes function and how our genes are expressed to be translated into functioning proteins. And also that the requirements of each person for any particular nutrient can vary by hundreds of times, sometimes more than 1,000-fold. So each particular person has their own individual biochemical profile, and they also have their own immune profile. So the immune system consists of many, many different cell types, and these cell types are constantly talking with each other and messaging. They're backed up by a range of different organs, and everything has to be functioning ideally for you to be able to say, okay, I feel a little twitch at the back of my throat. I'll go to bed for 2 hours and then I'll be fine again. Most people can't quite pull that off. A person who can do that actually is very fortunate. They have a pretty well-functioning immune system. For the population at large, I think a big message we need to get out is that the vast majority of Americans, and certainly of people around the world, are not getting sufficient amounts of the nutrients they need to have an optimal immune system. Now, those single cells especially are out there on their own. Many of them are circulating in the blood. They're being exposed to stressful factors, toxins that come in with the food, with the air, even with the water. And they're directly exposed in the blood and the body fluids and in the tissues to those toxins. These are single cells that are out there on their own. So they're doing one unit scouting parties. And they have a much higher requirement for all the basic nutrients. Now, I've been saying all through my work that the vitamins and the minerals are the building blocks of life. These are the substances that the body must have in order to function. And nowhere is this true more than with the immune system, which has a lot of similarities with the brain, by the way, and which actually works very closely with the brain. So those single immune cells out there have very high demands for all of the essential nutrients. And we know from all sorts of surveys that the average American is not getting sufficient amounts of several different nutrients. So that is a factor that is easy to measure. And even without measuring it, we can create our own nutritional insurance by having a supplement program that practically guarantees that we're going to be getting sufficient amounts of those nutrients. I see the gears turning in Daniel's head. So what's your question, Daniel?
I'm just trying to think of the people listening, and it's how do you arm the soldiers
in the war against viruses, in the war against bacteria. And sometimes the soldiers get out of control. So sometimes
Right.
immune cells, whether, and we think of it a lot as white blood cells that go after an attack.
Right.
And so the immunity is really to guard us from abnormal cells in our bodies. So think of cancer cells, or things from the outside. And you often say that you were sucker punched by an invader that was on the inside, which was cancer. And so your immune cells have to be balanced to be able to recognize trouble and fight it, but then not to see normal cells and fight that. So it's keeping them healthy, well-armed, balanced, but not that they lose their minds.
So I love what Dr. Kidd said. He was talking about, the nutrients, what he sees as the nutrients. I couldn't agree more, which is why I wrote the Omni Diet. I went on my journey to heal myself. And when I started taking classes and I was blessed to meet people like you, and some of the other experts that I met along the way, I went, oh, ding, ding, ding. And so that's when I wrote the Omni Diet. But in the Omni Diet, a big part of the Omni Diet is supplements. It's not just food, it's supplements, because we can't do it all with just, unless you are sleeping perfectly, you are eating perfectly, you are, meditating and not succumbing to stress in your life, and you are not you are not exposed to environmental toxins, like we can't do it perfectly. So I just think of supplements as the way to mine the gap, if you will. And so just to give you that insurance and cover that gap. And when I got my nutrition right, my supplements right, and I learned how to sleep because I wasn't sleeping, and for me, meditation was really important. But those were the things that really, the big four for me, that really helped. And I got bombarded after the quarantine started. My community bombarded me, and they're asking me to do videos again, because you helped me before, on my supplement routine. And the only reason I have hesitated is because it's so complex. It's like, I want to do it, but breaking it down for people is long.
Well, why don't we start at the very beginning? And the very beginning is the fortress. There are barriers. The skin is a barrier. The skin is a very important barrier. Think if you didn't have a skin. Right. You'd be totally vulnerable to anything that came along. Then the linings of the mouth, all the other orifices, the linings of the nose, all along the GI tract, all along the lung airways, those have continuous layers of cells within which are embedded immune cells. So there are immune cells that are actually part of the lining. Then there are immune cells that actually spend most of their time in the opening. That is, consider the lung airways that we all think about these days. Within the airway cavity itself, or biologically we say the lumen, there are immune cells that reside and that are continually monitoring the air that's coming in. And you can actually generate incredible pictures from asbestos fibers getting into the lung, because the immune cell will attempt to eat and kill the asbestos fiber, but it can't do it. So then you get these incredibly twisted and elongated immune cells. And so as particles come in with a well-functioning system, those barriers hold up. The mucus that's along the linings contains certain antibodies. And when things are going well, most of the particles that come in, including most or all of the viruses, get hung up in the mucus. They get bound by antibodies like IgE, for example, and then they get neutralized. They don't even get beyond the outer defenses. Now, the main nutrient that's required for that function is vitamin A. And vitamin A is very interesting because not only is it needed for the cells to have tight junctions against each other, but also it has an interaction with the friendly bacteria that also live in all those regions. And so the friendly bacteria actually make vitamin A. And the vitamin A that they make, together with the vitamin A that we get from our diet, feeds the epithelium and feeds the immune cells and tells the immune cells to be mature and to be alert and vigilant. And an interesting thing about vitamin A is that most supplements give it as beta carotene, although we know that people of certain ethnic groups and people within the population in general can have mutations that make it hard for them to make vitamin A from beta carotene. And that's why we only use preformed vitamin A in our supplements. We don't want to take any chances.
How much vitamin A? And we have to go to the next podcast. But how much vitamin A should people take on a daily basis to support their immune system?
3,000 to 5,000 international units.
And how much is in Neurobite Plus?
5,000.
5,000. That's great. Right. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about more strategies to strengthen your immune system. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are in Immunity Week. Never a more pressing time to do this. We're here with our friend and colleague, Dr. Parris Kidd, who is the Chief Science Officer at BrainMD. We just finished talking about vitamin A and the lining of your lungs, the lining of your gut, and how important vitamin A is for that. Parris, what else should people be thinking about?
Well, you brought up in the last segment, how do we arm the immune cells, right? Well, not only do we have to arm them, but we have to make sure they can be mobile. And for them to be able to move alone requires that they have very high levels inside of vitamin C and certain other water antioxidants, water phase antioxidants, but mostly vitamin C. If they have enough vitamin C, that can actually back up antioxidants that they may not have sufficient amounts of. So they need vitamin C to be mobile. So if you set up a model, an experiment in which an immune cell is deprived of vitamin C, first it's rolling along in the petri dish, and then you take away the vitamin C and it comes to a grinding halt.
Oh, interesting.
It's like removing the treads from a tank. You give the vitamin C back, it can move again. And that's very, very important because you can actually witness immune cells trailing. They can pick up messages from viruses and bacteria in the bloodstream or in the tissues, and they actually chase them down and hopefully catch them and then kill them. Now, there are two ways they can kill them. One is to just simply gobble them up. They're bigger than the particle, and they go after the particle and they take it in and then they digest it. The other way is to release ammunition. They generate free radical substances and they combine those substances with chlorine or bromine to make a highly damaging, highly reactive substance, which is basically hypochlorite or hypobromite. And that can knock out the particle, and then they go ahead and finish off the particle. But in the process of doing that, there is a field of fire. So this is actually close quarters confrontation. And if they don't have sufficient protection inside, they themselves can also be destroyed. And that's where antioxidants come in. Now, from the time that I wrote my book on antioxidants, way before some of our watchers were even born, I realized that it's so very important that immune cells be well supplied with antioxidants. So here again, you have vitamin C, but you also have vitamin E, and you have an array of minerals that are essential for antioxidant enzymes that provide antioxidant protection. Things like zinc, copper, iron, selenium, manganese. So these are all minerals that are essential for life. They have other functions, but they're also critical for the immune cells to have sufficient antioxidant protection that they don't become inadvertent victims of their own, confrontation with viruses or bacteria or fungi or whatever else is coming in and giving them trouble. So very important that they be well supplied with vitamin C and with antioxidants, both for motility and to help protect them against their own attacks against foreign particles or substances or agents. And then
how much vitamin C, Parris?
Well, 2,000 milligrams a day. If you're really under pressure, and by the way, we have to think about the human body. We have to understand that the human body is a highly dynamic organism, and so all of the daily stresses that we're under, all of life, really, all of living life, whether or not we're under, isolation, brings stresses, and those stresses tend to turn over nutrients. So the more stress we're under, the more life challenges we're under, whether it's emotional, chemical, lifestyle, infection, all of those tend to deplete nutrients from the body. So this is how different people can have very, very different nutritional requirements. And it's very important to study your own body and to have a feeling for when you may be running low on something, and also to do the nutritional insurance. And the nutritional insurance is fundamentally based on a really, really good multiple.
Yeah, because I heard you you started to mention a whole bunch of different nutrients, and unless you're like me and you don't mind taking a whole bunch of pills every day, a lot of those can be found in a really good multiple.
Yeah.
So, some of them I add to my multiple, a lot of them. But you've got to have that really good basic.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And that's, why we created Neurovite Plus. And we also have a brand new vitamin C coming out called
NeuroC, which is a liposomal vitamin C, where vitamin C is actually packed in these little fat molecules that increases the absorption.
it tastes really good.
It tastes really good. So vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, all essential. You also mentioned zinc. And
before you leave the new vitamin C product, let me just clarify a couple of things. It's 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C per dose. So you can do it twice and you have as much vitamin C as you need, unless you're under a really aggressive attack by an infectious agent. The other thing is that the little structures that are carrying along the vitamin C and improving the absorption are actually made of phospholipids.
Mm-hmm.
So these are substances that make up the outer layers of our cells, what we call the membranes. And so I've been working on cell membranes, since I did my PhD thesis. And these phospholipids actually are instrumental in bringing the vitamin C into the immediate vicinity of the cell membrane,
mm-hmm.
and helping it to be better absorbed. So there are no fats in the liposomal vitamin C. It's these biologically active substances called phospholipids, which have their own benefits besides delivering vitamin C as well.
Thank you for clarifying that. You mentioned something really important. You said unless you are under attack. So let's just say we are in a position where we're really worried about being exposed to something, or we are sick. How much should they increase their vitamin C? Should listeners increase their vitamin C if they are exposed to something or they're sick?
Well, the turnover of vitamin C increases dramatically when a person is under any kind of infectious attack. And so a good regimen would be a gram every hour. That would be one dose of the NeuroC every hour. And then when you get up to about 6 or 7 or 8 grams, your bowels will begin to get a little bit loose. And that tells you that's a purely physical phenomenon. There's no chemical toxicity going on.
Okay.
It tells you that there's so much vitamin C in your intestine that it's drawing water into the intestine. So at that point, you pull back and wait a few hours and then do some more.
Interesting.
And if you do it that way, you're delivering a very generous dose of vitamin C to keep your immune system functioning optimally. And also, vitamin C has direct antiviral effects.
Right.
It directly kills certain viruses.
Yeah, no, I love that.
All right. We're giving them so much good information. When we come back, I want to talk about zinc and why the president actually in one of his press conferences talked about zinc potentially helping some of the medications for COVID-19.
I've been seeing that with a lot of physicians. I've actually been seeing videos go viral about physicians saying you need to be taking zinc and Schweppes, even if you're taking medication.
Tonic water.
Yeah. So it's like
we'll talk
this
about
crazy
that.
thing.
All
So
right, stay with us.
welcome back. We are on episode 3 with Dr. Kidd, and this is just so fascinating. Dr. Kidd, I just have to personally tell you, I actually feel like I owe a lot of why I feel so great and so healthy to you. And my supplement routine has changed dramatically, and I actually haven't been sick. You even mentioned it. So even during this time of this crazy quarantine, I'm usually one of those people who get sick a lot. And when I get sick, I get really sick. And it's been few years now since I've been really sick.
Quarantine all by itself is bad for the immune system.
Right.
You're not
actually,
outside.
I feel great.
In the sun.
I've enjoyed it.
There's chronic stress. People are watching the news too much. So we've talked about vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, and I also want to talk about zinc. In Neurovite Plus, we have 20 milligrams of zinc. And why is zinc important to the immune system?
Well, with that very nice product we just developed for mood, the Happy Saffron, I learned something about zinc. I learned that zinc is spread across all of our chemistry, across all of our biochemistry. It's required for at least 200 enzymes to function. It's required for our DNA to be transcribed into proteins. It's required for at least 2,000 proteins to function, which could be as much as a third of all the proteins that the body makes. And zinc is just involved in a wide range of organ functions, so much so that in countries where people are not especially children, are not getting enough zinc in their diet, their growth actually becomes stunted. And those children they do have a higher risk for diarrheal and other types of infections. And if you give them zinc, the rate of infection falls, their growth resumes. And that's just one example of how important it is. So it's important for the solid tissues, that is the bone marrow, the thymus, the spleen, to make immune cells. And it's also important for the immune cells themselves to be communicating with each other, to be fixing damage, and to generally be functioning on a high level. And then it's important as part of the antioxidant defenses. So there are very important antioxidant enzymes that need to have zinc. So zinc goes across all of our biochemistry, and we need it not only for our mood and our memory and other brain functions, but for a wide range of immune functions and for overall growth. We need it for our reproductive and sexual function. So, for example, men lose zinc during sexual activity. And so zinc is just a very, very important nutrient. And it's estimated that up to 20% of all Americans may not be getting enough zinc. So we talk about nutrient gaps in the American diet. And it may be that as many as 1 in 5 Americans are not getting sufficient zinc. That's by the most conservative, by the most limited estimates.
Wow.
And during one of the White House news conferences, the president, who's been rooting for hydroxychloroquine, which I think had a significant positive impact on my parents who both had COVID-19. He mentioned zinc, but so did Dr. Philaday, who's our integrative medicine chief, because zinc was involved in actually killing the virus.
I've actually, and you mentioned in the last episode, I've been seeing a number of videos going around about zinc, and I don't know why Schweppes, but
because of the quinine.
But that it helps
Tonic
it
water.
absorb better, that it helps with pain, that
Right. Quinine water is actually similar to chloroquine. I mean, correct me, Parris, if I'm wrong, and that helps to kill malaria. And so the quinine has been a treatment in the past for infectious agents.
Well, one thing that I do is I'm the science guy. From the time I was a little boy, I was a nerd. I got serious.
Nerds rule the world, by the way.
I got serious about science by the time I was 11 years old. Science is all that I do. It's the only thing I really can do. And I've learned through my 36-year career with dietary supplements that we've got to stay with the science. Okay? Dr. Fauci is one of my heroes, because when I was writing my book on HIV, Living with the AIDS Virus, he was the one who actually let in the activists and worked with the activists to move forward with getting that virus under control. And I'm with him. We've got to stay with the science. YouTube does not cut it. You've got to stay with the clinical trials. You've got to stay with the science that we know. And we know that in clinical trials, zinc as glycinate, which is what we have in our supplements, benefits immunity. That we know for a fact. And you can get it in a very substantial allowance from the Neurovite Plus. You can even take twice the dosage of the Neurovite Plus if you want added protection. Now, we haven't even got to vitamin D, which turns out to be a very, very important nutrient for balancing the immune system. So the immune system has all sorts of ways it can go. It can be hesitant or it can be over-aggressive. So it can be more or less pro-inflammatory or it can be more or less anti-inflammatory. And vitamin D made in the skin or coming in with the foods is converted into a hormone for which all the immune cells and the solid tissues have sensors. They have receptors. So even the single immune cells can respond to vitamin D. And we know that up to 90% of Americans are not getting sufficient dietary vitamin D.
Right.
And because of all the paranoia about skin problems, people as they go out, even when I take my grandkids to the beach, I see little kids totally covered. Mm-hmm. They have full clothes on, they have a big hat on, they're not getting enough sun. So it's no wonder that we're having issues. And people with vitamin D deficiency also have a higher risk for autoimmune diseases, mm-hmm. such as multiple sclerosis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, stuff like that, because vitamin D is balancing the activity of the immune system. And that's very, very easy to get. So, you know, BrainMD offers a very high quality vitamin D3. And I want to caution the people out there not to take vitamin D2, because it competes with vitamin D3. You need vitamin D3. That's the one that becomes the hormone. That's the one that has receptors all through our tissues. So that's vitamin E now is in the cell membranes, and vitamin E is important. And 80% of Americans probably aren't getting enough vitamin E from their diets. Are we seeing a picture here of the American diet being really sad? The standard American.
So let's stay with vitamin D.
Yeah, because I want to say something about that too.
Just for a minute. There's a new study out of Indonesia on who died with COVID-19, and they were older, male, and had low vitamin D. So when they actually corrected for age, sex, and other conditions, low vitamin D was one of the significant predictors of death. And so it is so important. And what I've seen routinely over the last 20 years is a very high percentage of my patients are deficient in vitamin D, which is why in NeuroBite Plus, we have 2,000 international units of vitamin D.
But I need to touch on this because I take NeuroBite plus I take our additional vitamin D, and I take it daily. I take about 10,000 international units daily because I think not everyone absorbs vitamin D the same way. I think it's dependent on multiple things.
Yeah, there are also mutations too.
Right, I test mine regularly. Yeah. I have an amazing endocrinologist up in San Francisco that is a researcher at UCSF, and he calls himself the savant of thyroid. And much like you, he's gotten grief his entire life because he does things very unconventionally, has a huge waiting list of people coming from all over the world to see him. Gets grief from his colleagues, and I've never felt better. But there's a big discrepancy on what keeping your vitamin D level optimal is. Now, for me, he thinks it's very overblown, this idea of vitamin D deficiency or toxicity. He thinks it's very overblown. Vitamin D toxicity is just like the idea of it is just not what people think it is. He wants mine between 80 and 100. So, but I hear people say, "Oh, that's too high." He's like, "That's crazy."
But that's within a normal range. Why would
my OBGYN said that's way too high?
Yeah, no,
So I want to clarify this.
Well, let's talk about units. At nanogram per mil, 80 to 100 is very high, but it's still safe. And it looks with vitamin D like the higher you can get, the better off you are. I would not recommend going beyond 100 nanogram per mil, which is 250 nanomoles per liter. But the higher the vitamin D goes, the better off you are. And this includes the health of all the organs. It includes brain function. It includes bones, joints, everything. Vitamin D is a pro-hormone. And when it becomes converted into the functioning hormone, calcitriol, then it does all kinds of marvelous things. And 10,000 IU is actually a fairly modest dose. And we know that taking it daily is better than going to your physician and getting a huge injection of it every few weeks or whatever. So important to take a daily vitamin D3 of high quality and to keep your total intake no more than 10,000 IU. And then it will go up. And then to keep your level, your blood level at no higher than 100 nanogram per mil.
Yeah, I see these doctors
measuring
arguing.
It is important. Measuring it so have a sense of how much you need. All right.
But I gotta tell you, I've never felt better.
We're going to talk about magic mushrooms. Mushrooms and immunity, not hallucinogens. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are here with our friend, Dr. Parris Kidd, talking about immunity, and we've talked about the importance of vitamin A and vitamin C and vitamin D and vitamin E and zinc. And a lot of people
think of herbals like echinacea as really important. Mushrooms are getting a fair amount of attention, and in the diet, garlic, onions, and mushrooms have been found to help immunity. But Parris, talk to us about herbal medications that might help.
Well, whether or not herbals will help depends on the particular herbal, the clinical trials that have been done with that herbal. That is, what do we know about it under controlled research circumstances, and what sort of immune problem you have. Now, if you feel a cold coming on, or if you know that you have a susceptibility to getting colds, echinacea is just fine. It'll help you. Elderberry is just fine. So is high oral vitamin C, and always the really, really good multiple. And we didn't bring up the omega-3s yet, but the omega-3s are very important for balancing the immune system as well. However, herbals like echinacea and elderberry and certain others make the immune system more aggressive. So they stimulate the immune system, and they get it to be running around pretty excited, so to speak, looking for trouble, maybe going off a little bit half-cocked. So if a person is hospitalized and they have inflammation in their lungs or in other tissues or whatever, and you give them herbals, you may be actually worsening the inflammation.
Oh, so is that why they tell you to go off of all your herbals before surgery?
Well, potentially, yes.
So I thought it was just the blood thinning properties of some of them, but maybe that's more, maybe that's part of it.
Right.
Well, let me just do a little sidebar here, because one of the things that's killing people with COVID-19 is something called a cytokine storm, which is a dramatic increase in inflammation in the body. And the people who are most vulnerable to mortality have underlying inflammatory illnesses like obesity.
Right.
When I see all the pictures of people that died, not all, but a lot of them, they're significantly overweight. And adipose tissue, fat tissue, actually produces something called inflammatory cytokines. And calming that down, one, by being healthy, is really important. But then, so I can see that's where omega-3 fatty acids can begin to calm down the inflammation.
Right. And practically no American is getting a sufficient, except for you and Shana and some of us in the Amen community, practically nobody else is getting enough EPA and DHA omega-3s, because
he had to tell me to stop taking so much. I'm like, well, more must be better. So
3,000 milligrams max of EPA and DHA. Max of EPA and DHA. 3,000
milligrams. That is what is in 5.6 grams.
Oh, okay, because I'm taking 5.6 grams. Okay.
Brain and Body Power Max.
So if the average person goes into CVS and buys fish oil, they'll get 300 milligrams. That's 1/10 of what would be optimal.
Right.
And they can take it forever, and they'll never get up to where they need it to be.
So just to go back before I derailed us, echinacea and elderberry can be helpful, but you also don't want to overdo it, because it's like putting all of the soldiers on speed.
But you mentioned mushrooms at some point.
Well, now I want us to talk about mushrooms. We're actually working on a mushroom product. What about mushrooms and the immunity?
Yeah, I'm very glad that we're doing a mushroom product, and we also have a green.
We're not talking about magic mushrooms here.
Yeah, we also, don't even ask about magic mushrooms, but we also have a greens product that we're coming out with that has mushrooms in it. The mushrooms are very, very interesting. They don't stimulate the immune system. What they do is they give the soldiers training. So the mushrooms have huge molecules. They have huge carbohydrate molecules with complicated, big molecules with complicated shapes. And as these come into the intestinal tract, the immune cells on patrol pick them up, sample them, they digest them, they sample them, they show them to each other, and that gives them alertness. They become more alert to be tuned up for other particles that come in and are harmful. And probably because of our millions of years of consuming mushrooms, our immune cells don't see the mushrooms as non-self. They see the mushroom, these are glucan substances. They're not sugar or sugars. They are very big carbohydrate molecules, almost like fiber in some cases. So the immune cells see these as friendly molecules, but at the same on the same experience, they tune up the immune cells, and so the immune cells are just on better level of alert. So I wrote a comprehensive review on mushrooms and cancer some time back that shows very clearly that one mushroom in particular can be very effective against cancer. So it will improve the alertness of the immune system in finding cancer cells and eliminating them.
That's so interesting. I know
And which mushroom was that?
Coriolis, or so-called turkey tail. It's not
interesting.
It's not a food mushroom, but it is edible. And the other mushrooms that we will have in our products are maitake, shiitake, and reishi, all of which also have glucans, and all of which also help to tune up the immune system. And so we know that they improve immune function without overstimulating and without upregulating or downregulating the immune system. And that's what's so nice about them. They're very important for fine-tuning the immune system.
Yeah, you hear stories about, even for thousands of years, like the Chinese giving their horses mushrooms before going into battle because it made them run faster. And I mean, it's just so interesting to,
Well,
Right.
So I took cordyceps when I was working out really hard and have a really high heart rate because of all the thyroid and stuff that I take.
Right.
And so someone told me to take cordyceps. And I think I felt a little better. I actually think I felt a little stronger. I don't know that I noticed, like, it wasn't like taking a medication, but I felt pretty good taking it. So
yeah, cordyceps is actually a kind of down regulator of the immune system.
Yeah, I felt like I was a little stronger, could breathe a little better. And
we also are going to have lion's mane in the product as well, which has been shown to have some cognitive benefits.
Right. Now lion's mane not only has the glucans for the immune system, but it also has substances that increase growth factors in the brain. And it's been shown in clinical trials to improve memory and other higher brain functions. So, and it's a very expensive mushroom to get. So I'm really glad that we were able to get a reliable supply of it and to put it into the brain immunity product that we're coming out with.
so I have one important question. We've talked about a lot of things, and I think it's really informative to people, but a question that I get a lot, and even in my podcast and my video that I did with you for my community that was so helpful to people, but people still ask because they may not have seen that. Can people take all of this together? Do they need to take them at separate times of the day with different types of food? So
yeah, they can take all of this together. And if they're relatively healthy people under stress, or even if they're not that healthy, they should be taking the really good multiple, the really concentrated omega-3, EPA and DHA, the mushrooms. They should have their blood vitamin D3 monitored and get it onto the high level. They should be sure to have their blood levels monitored for the minerals and so on. But all of those things are okay. It's just that if they're hospitalized and they have a fairly aggressive inflammatory situation going on, there are certain herbals they should not take. No, there are other herbals that actually regulate the inflammatory response, such as the curcumins. And for people who have ongoing inflammatory issues, I would highly recommend the brain curcumins product that we have, for example. And I take lots of that myself. So the curcumins are not really immune stimulants or immune regulators, but they do tend to help the inflammatory response to come to a termination. So does vitamin D, so do the omega-3s.
Okay.
So limited inflammation is good, but long-term inflammation is not good. And the proper balance of nutrients and herbals can help to make sure that your inflammatory response is a healthy response and doesn't get out of control.
No, it's perfect.
Well, Parris, this was so helpful.
So helpful.
We are so grateful to have you as our friend and the chief science officer at BrainMD. We wish you health and safety, and together we're going to make more great products to serve our community.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. And I share your and Tana's goals in getting the information out to all the people out there who need it, particularly at this stressful and challenging time.
Thank you.
Thanks, my friend.
Take care.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.